101 series. We'll get started. Promptly we start at 6:30 so that we can move this along. We appreciate those of you who are here and are interested in learning about the sort of the backstory of school budgeting. As you know, Victor Carlson here has been deeply involved in preparing materials. We've been working together. It was as a result of what we learned last spring about some really important information that was not available. It was too late to sort of introduce certain things in March as the budget process was rolling along to follow the New York State's timeline. So these Budget 101s is an effort to provide some essential background information that will help shape a larger understanding about what goes into a school budget. So the information tonight is a continuation of a series, and tonight our Budget 101 topics pertain to equipment, contractual supplies, and BOCES services. We have our budget managers here who are our principals and our directors who will come up and they will be presenting their budgets so that you again can hear what parts of this process they're deeply engaged in and the kinds of things that support their budgets. As you know, all of this is available on our website prominently displayed on our main page as well as the business page. And it's all the archives of all the discussions and all the materials and artifacts that we distributed. So I want to thank you again for coming, and throughout the presentation, please feel free to interject any questions that you might have. This is not just for us to talk at you, but for at any point there's information or questions that you have, please feel free to ask those questions. Okay, let's get started, Victor.
So again, as Dr. Henning mentioned, this is our third installment of our Budget 101 workshop series. Tonight we're going to be talking about these different categories. Equipment, which typically includes individual or group items with cost in excess of $1,000 and a useful life in excess of 1 year. Contractual agreements with providers of services, and these range from construction service agreements for preventative maintenance and repairs to tuition agreements with other school districts for educational services. Supplies are typically individual or group items with cost under $1,000 and a useful life of less than 1 year. And finally, BOCES services, which Dr. Henning will expand on. BOCES is an acronym for Board of Cooperative Educational Services, and it's really the original shared service arrangement between multiple school districts through the BOCES. So you'll hear oftentimes we'll talk about COSERS, which is short for cooperative service. And these are agreements between multiple school districts operating within a single BOCES that are receiving the same service. And again, because it's a shared service, the state incentivizes school districts to participate in BOCES COSERS through state aid. So we receive BOCES aid for any eligible services that we solicit through BOCES. And for the purposes of this presentation, because we don't want to have to repeat equipment, contractual supplies, and BOCES, we're simply going to create another acronym because in academia, we love acronyms. So we're going to use ECSB to describe these types of items that we're purchasing.
Okay. So BOCES has been around for many decades. There are 37 BOCES in the state of New York, and they are developed or in creation to help districts to afford programs and services that would ordinarily be too expensive. Our Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES services 18 school districts, and those school districts are in Northern Westchester as well as Putnam County. And without the services that BOCES provides, many services would simply be too cost prohibitive and restrictive for us. Some of the services include our communications specialist, Jennifer Gary, who started working in our district, doing a lot of great work to capture a lot of really wonderful things that are happening in the district. A lot of our professional learning, if we don't have it offered under BOCES, we ask BOCES if they could engage in a contract. More than likely under those 18 districts, someone else besides us is using that service. And of course, our career and technical education programs are a critical part of our participation with BOCES. We don't have equipment or space or room to offer automotive, just in case you hadn't noticed, or cosmetology or cutlery or culinary sciences. So without BOCES, none of our students, and we have probably about 100 students who participate in those services, both students who have IEPs as well as students who don't, and some of our English as a new language learner students participate in those services. So if you think about that, if you think about the physical space to educate students in career and technical education and what that would cost the district, it would absolutely be cost prohibitive. So our BOCES is very vital in terms of providing those services. Even if they don't offer a service, the wonderful thing about our Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES is that they're eager to work with the districts. They're eager to find out of those agreements or look for other ways. And it's not just our Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. Some of our services come through Suffolk BOCES, Nassau BOCES. I think we have we work with Capital Region BOCES, Rockland BOCES, Dutchess. So any number of places where there are services that could benefit us, and that obviously we gain a benefit at the end through aid that comes back to the districts. Those BOCES are very user-friendly and helpful in doing that. And of course, we get reimbursed up to 67.5%. It depends upon the service. There are some services that the reimbursement rate is not as high, and others where it is obviously very helpful to the district. And it depends upon the service altogether. And as I said, that aid comes back and it helps us with our budget at the end of the school year, the new school year, and certainly reduces the costs of operating our system. Any questions about BOCES?
So I'm going to revisit a slide that we've been looking at the last few workshops, just to show the breakdown of our budget in terms of the different categories. We broke it down into 3 categories: salaries and benefits, which were presented at our last workshop in December. They make up about 78% of our budget. And the techniques that we use in developing our salary and benefit budget is zero-based, and that we evaluate each position based on its need to continue for the following school year. Debt service is all of our costs associated with our debt from past construction projects, and that's also based on the zero-based approach. We have amortization schedules with fixed payments that we have to pay for those bonds or bond anticipation notes. Tonight we're going to be discussing this red pie slice, which is again our equipment, contractual, supplies, and BOCES services. And this portion of our budget is developed based on a hybrid of both historical consumption, because we've been operating for however many years, and we know the cost to operate a school building and these other departments, but also based on a zero-based approach, because we do have our budget managers who are here tonight present and make their requests each year to the administration for the budget development, and they do that, of course, in concert with the strategic coherence. So one important concept, probably the most important concept of tonight's presentation, is the different strategy in budgeting from a corporate level to a local government level. So corporations construct their budgets to expend the least or set a floor, and they do that in order to maximize profits. However, if necessary, expenses may exceed a total budget, which reduces profitability. Contrast that with local governments, who have to prepare their budgets to anticipate the worst case scenario, or in other words, they set a ceiling of what might be expected. And the reason why a ceiling approach is taken is because under general municipal law, expenses cannot exceed the total budget. Obviously, we're not able to raise additional taxes mid-year to fund additional expenses. So there's really a completely different construct in the development of a corporate budget versus a local government budget. Again, local government budget trying to anticipate the worst case scenario. And you'll see that as we go through some of our departmental budgets. So again, reviewing a couple slides from our last time. The budget development process begins in October. Each of our budget managers identify all of their requests for new staff and resources. We're identifying mandates and ordinary contingent items, a couple of new mandates for next year, which we discussed last few board meetings, and that last budget presentation was the need for additional counselors at the K-5 level. So these requests for instructional CSB are developed by the principals and directors, which are necessary for implementing the strategic coherence.
That plan is really consumed in this graphic. It's sort of like our infographic for the SCP, and that's the short term that we use to describe the strategic coherence plan. So everything in the green represents services or experiences, curriculum that both to support students social emotionally as well as academic, that all of our children are exposed to along the way as they learn their content areas of math, science, social studies, English, physical education, all the arts and music programs, and everything that we offer can be represented here. And as Victor said, and as we've said in our earlier presentations, the numbers are important, but the philosophy is what drives the numbers. This is what this school system believes in. Any school district that you go to will have some set of a framework that's really the governing principles behind all the decisions that are made about how to allocate and best use resources. We want our children to truly be successful on this road to life, work, and future learning. And as you know, and you've seen and heard us talk about, the pace of change now will never be as slow as it is. And that all of the things that are happening really reflect a world in which most of us were not part of. When we were in high school, some of us, with the exception of Chris, probably would never have experienced some of the things that some of our children are experiencing now, and will be important for them to be successful around. So we don't want to wait for children to enter high school and then start talking about perseverance and adaptability. We don't want to wait for our students to enter middle school and suddenly start talking about being a digital citizen. All of that happens now and early as they enter JFK and exit through the high school. And everything that we talk about is really laid on this framework with regards to how we want children to be successful as they experience learning here in the district and go on to college, work, careers in the military.
So these next several slides, I'm actually going to go through pretty quickly. Our presentation tonight is really a two-pronged approach. We have our presentation by functional category, and this is in accordance with the New York State Chart of Accounts. So this will align to our budget statement that's put out each May. It's a requirement of New York State. Later on in the presentation, which is more useful for the understanding of the different departmental budgets, we'll have this broken down to the different departments. So you can see, so for example, on the next slide, the next several slides, we may have certain budget managers who are responsible for overseeing multiple functional categories. Like you'll see here under teaching and supervision, we've got a $2.2 million amount here for our equipment, contractual agreements, supplies, and BOCES services. So breaking it down by budget manager will make it a little more transparent and easier to understand. But for purposes of tying into our budget statement, I also wanted to present it in this manner. And really, the purpose of presenting it in this way also is just to show how this compares to the total budgets. You'll see, each of these categories, like the smallest one, for example, civic activities, 1/100% is that budget. For co-curricular is less than 0.04 of a percentage. But again, it's more important to look at it by department, because again, each department manager may oversee multiple functional categories, and we'll be able to speak to what's included in each departmental budget. So we start with Board of Ed, District Clerk, Meeting, and Superintendent budget. Again, you'll see in its entirety it makes up less than 1/110th of a percent of the total budget. And Dr. Henning, I'll hand it over.
Sure. You'll see some repetition in these next few slides with the budget managers. Contractual is, again, we're in a service industry, as Victor and I mentioned, I think in the last Budget 101, there's not a single operation that isn't covered by a contract of some nature. So under contractual, our copy machines, every budget manager has a slice of that pie and has to contribute to the overall cost of the copier and the printer systems. This budget also covers the Board of Education, so any new training that our new board members are required to have is covered here under professional memberships. Again, memberships for the board and myself to participate in the New York State Schools Boards Association, which is an important advocacy group that does a lot of work to try to ensure that the needs of the system, the needs of districts are met when it comes to dealing with some of the bureaucracy in Albany. Budget newsletter, which is an important part of the process. Every year, you'll see information that's produced in print and sent out to the community to announce our budget. Supplies, again, all the things that are necessary to make sure that we can print or duplicate things that are necessary for the functioning of the district. Our BOCES services, again, certain systems are under those contracts, the superintendent's evaluation system, as well as teacher's evaluation system. All of those are contractually driven, and all of those are required under each of those contracts. So there's under every person's contract is some provision for how they're being evaluated. Of course, board policy review, which has been, if you followed our board meetings, you've heard Mrs. Gosh talk extensively about the new policies and the new updates, and so that system is also covered under this budget, which Victor described as 8/100ths of a budget of basically a $99 million budget. Questions? So exciting, right?
So the next component of the budget is the finance budget, and then again, this extends beyond multiple functional categories, so I grouped it all together in finance. Our contractual expenditures include our enrollment forecasting, fixed asset actuarial reporting, which is needed for both insurance purposes and also financial statement reporting purposes. We have 4 levels of audit, 3 of which are shown here. Internal audit service, actually 2 of which. Internal audit services, which is really an efficiency audit. External audit services, which is a financial statement audit, which is required by New York State Controller's Office. Copier and printer leases, you'll see a recurring theme, again, as Dr. Henry mentioned. Each department has a share of our copier and printer leases. Property tax bill preparation, we have intermunicipal agreements with both the town of Southeast and also Pupil County for preparation of our tax bills and also the collection of those taxes. Fiscal advisor services, so anytime we go out to issue a bond or bond anticipation note, we seek the services of our fiscal advisors. We have professional memberships, purchasing consortium memberships. Under supplies, we have copier and printer toner, copier paper, check stock, tax bills. The cost again for supplying those tax bills, I believe we have over 13,000 residents that we send tax bills out to annually. BOCES services includes 2 services, our state aid evaluation and planning services. So we're going to be talking about that at the next Budget 101, but the state aid budget is very complex, with each item of state aid having literally several dozen lines of calculation to come up with those numbers. And we have a service with Questar BOCES that helps us ensuring that we're maximizing our state aid and we're receiving our fair share of the state budget. And finally, we have grant writing services under our BOCES agreement for any grants that we apply to. And just this past fall, Mr. Berardo and I applied for the Baseball Tomorrow grant application. We're still waiting to hear back from them. So in total, the finance department budget is 0.15% of the overall budget. Anyone have any questions? All right, with that, we will move on to Ms. Culligan, our human resources budget.
Good evening, everyone. As you can see, the human resources portion of the budget is also very small, 0.17%. Under contractual, it's professional learning, which would be conferences, any kind of subscriptions, memberships, again, office equipment leases, and affordable care compliance. Supplies, the general office supplies. And for BOCES services, this is services for employee assistance, employee benefits coordination, recruitment, negotiations, and certification reviews. And this includes such things as ASOP, which is our absence management system. It includes our employee assistant plan, GCM, which is mandated training, and also the healthcare consortium. And actually, over 50% of this $170,000 is related to healthcare. It's the healthcare consortium, it's the affordable care act compliance, as well as the school physician, and there is money in there for the hepatitis B vaccinations that we're required to provide. Any questions?
Okay, our next department is facilities. Mr. Bates is unavailable tonight, heading to a family need. So under our facilities budget, you see this actually is a pretty large budget, 2.65%. You'll see one larger component in a moment. But under equipment, we've got such things as floor polishers and steamers, spring trimmers, mowers, other outdoor equipment that's necessary to maintain facilities. Contractual, we have training expenses for new employees and hazardous material training and things of that nature. Uniform and tool reimbursements for our employees. Vehicle insurance. Architectural engineering services, as you are aware, or should be aware by now, we have a pretty strict regulatory compliance requirement with both the New York State DEC and New York City DEP, and complying with those two agencies, we obviously need the services of professional architects and engineers. The lion's share of the facilities budget is with our utilities. So natural gas and electricity probably make up a little over $1 million of this budget alone. Propane, oil, and telephone. Propane and oil are secondary utilities that we use as a fail-safe in case there's an interruption of natural gas. So again, our utilities budget makes up the majority of our facilities budget. We also have service contracts, both for preventative maintenance and also for repairs for plumbing, electrical, HVAC, alarm systems, fire and burglar, boilers, waste removal, pest management, elevators, wastewater treatment. So I don't know if anyone's aware, we actually have a wastewater treatment facility just beyond the high school, courtesy of the DEP. I want to say about 10 years ago, they requested that we install a wastewater treatment plant, and then we're responsible for maintaining that facility. We also have a radio lease and roof inspections. And again, all of those preventative maintenance and repair contracts help us maintain our facilities. So under supplies, we have obviously cleaning supplies, repair supplies, salt, sand. We're approaching the winter months. Seed, mulch, etc. For BOCES services, we have a risk management coaster, which is very important for us because the risk management coaster allows us to participate and have the service of BOCES to assist us in developing our emergency response planning. They also assist in coordinating tabletop exercises for district employees to participate in emergency responses based on the mock scenario. So we're very happy that we participate in our risk management coaster. And finally, we have a coaster for energy monitoring. So in total, our facilities part of the budget makes up 2.65% of our total budget. Again, the majority is within utilities. And some important things for us to consider as we put together the facilities budget: how many therms of natural gas are we going to use this winter? Is it going to be colder or milder than normal? What is normal? Will the winter be colder and snowier than normal? Will we need, we have a lot of overtime and a lot of, materials and salt and sand being used for clearing the roadways and the parking lots. In this spring and fall, will it be hotter than normal? So how many kilowatts of electricity will we use? Will it be more or less than normal? How many service calls will we have this year to repair plumbing, HVAC, or electrical issues? Will this be more or less than normal? So those are the types of things, that we consider. And here we have our theme is, in order to protect and maintain our facilities, we don't budget for normal, we budget for our anticipated worst case scenario. Again, going back to that theory of, in the beginning, of how we construct our budget as opposed to a corporate budget. Does anyone have any questions with the facilities?
From a couple of our Facebook watchers, they said that it's a little hard to hear. So since we didn't set up the
Scream?
the PA system, could you just talk a little bit louder?
I will scream. Question.
I have a question. When you anticipate for the worst case scenario, so say you did facilities approximately $900,000 or whatever it was, and you don't use all that money, where does that money go thereafter?
That money would then so the question for our Facebook Live audience, the question is, if the budget was constructed with an amount that was not expended in our utilities budget, where would that money go? That money would remain in that utilities budget and would remain unspent.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll take this one. Ms. Gosh is under the weather, so she couldn't be here to present this budget line which she manages. It's 1.19% of the total budget. Contractual, again, are all the services that are made available for professional learning, whether they include costs for anyone who's leading a workshop or attending a workshop. These are subscriptions to various services that we use, memberships, and any office lease lease equipment. Supplies, again, general supplies that you find in most offices that typically that support district-wide efforts. The tuition mandated tutoring services we're required to have when children are out either for purposes of being suspended. We're required to provide them with 2 hours of tutoring per day. If students are out for short-term medical reasons, they're also required to have tutoring. Some students may be in a facility, which also means that we're required to provide tutoring services for those. Some of those services are provided by our own staff, but when they're not, we must make sure that we have a service that can more flexibly serve the needs of those students. BOCES services, we have a number of items that are under this budget code. Obviously, we have to pay for all the assessments as well as all the scoring that is associated with assessments, whether it's online or it's print-based testing. The credit recovery service is Ingenuity, and that's for children who happen to pass a course, a Regents course, but perhaps do not pass the Regents exam itself, so there are opportunities for students to use that service for that purpose. The BOCES occupational education services and career and technical education services are fairly large. These are all the children who do go to BOCES to participate in either the culinary program or automotive, cosmetology, and all the programs that are available there that we cannot provide here because we don't have the facilities. I also believe that the occupational ed might also cover some of the programs like the colonial encampment, some parts of that, not all, but some parts of that also offset the cost. So that's the total of 1.169, 103 for all those services that are district-wide that are covered under that budget. Any questions for that, for curriculum assessment and instruction?
So when it comes to building a building budget, JFK is 0.2%, at $256,000. And you can see the breakdown between equipment, contractual, supplies, and textbooks. We didn't have anything in our equipment line last year, obviously, because we went through our construction process, and a lot was put into that budget. Obviously, moving forward, we will start to incorporate some more of those things to upgrade some of the older furniture, for example, in kindergarten and first grade. Second grade got all new furniture through the project. Contractual things are like our curriculum and learning support, Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. We contract for support from TC to have staff developers work directly with the teachers at the school site. We have a visitor management system. That's where you show your ID when you come in. We have to contract to that. Our copiers, and we have things like software for Follett and Fast Forward. Fast Forward is like a reading recovery type program for supporting students. A lot of our supplies for the curricular areas, run $94,000, and our textbooks were their way workbooks, Fountas and Pinnell, that's the F&P, and leveled literacy intervention kits. Those are the supports for reading. So you can see breakdown of our building. It's only 0.2%, 6%, and a lot of that goes into teachers and students. Any questions?
So similarly, at CB Star, our percentage is 0.26% of the total budget as well. For equipment, that some things would be filing cabinets for the reading department, furniture for the library, and $10,000 of that went for classroom furniture. Under contractual, curriculum and professional learning, again, Teachers College Reading Writing Project, and BOCES for teachers to go for workshops, copier leases, licenses, science and art expo materials, and language line, which is our translation services. And under that, $20,000 was for 3 copiers, $27,500 was for our TC facilitator and professional learning for teachers. Under supplies, it's our bid supplies for classrooms, Project Lead the Way supplies, copier supplies, recess supplies, colonial fair and encampment supplies for the 4th grade experience, and supplies for after-school clubs, student agendas, and our PBIS support. And under textbooks, Words Their Way, which is a word study program, is part of our ELA curriculum, and library books, for a total of $252,539.
Any questions for CB Star?
So you'll see a lot of similar themes here for the middle school. 0.29% of the total budget is what we spend in the middle school. Contractual, professional memberships. Teachers belong to different organizations, National Council of Teachers of English. We also belong to FLAX, which is a foreign language consortium, so that all of our students who take a foreign language, a world language, they provide the testing for us. Service contracts, professional learning. We do have a little professional learning around our school-wide read, where we bring teachers in the summer and we develop a plan for the year. Technology software to support students in the RTI process. We use Dreambox, we use MathSpace, Achieve 3000. This, for the next budget season, we'll actually move that to the technology department. Supplies, bids, general classroom supplies, office supplies, Project Lead the Way, STEM materials, department supplies such as calculators, microscopes. We teach technology, so we order wood, that sort of stuff for the tech program. Our makerspace and PBIS materials, textbooks, replacement text, digital editions and subscriptions, and workbooks for our living environment curriculum. So that's what we have. Thank you. Any questions?
So for the high school, we have a very similar budget to the middle school. Our equipment budget, most of this goes to makerspace furniture, which is similar to the furniture that you see here, but it's directed towards classrooms. We have 3 full makerspace classrooms currently in the building, and we're looking at expanding more. Contractually, we have professional memberships for all of our departments. We also have society memberships, which is Honor Society, Mu Alpha Theta, and societies such as that. We have Project Lead the Way, we have PBIS, we have Advanced Placement, which is a total registration. It's a program called Total Registration, which is how students digitally register for advanced placement. We have testing programs that we have to pay for, and our copiers, which run about $37,000 for leasing our copiers. Supplies, we have graduation, which approaches slightly over $10,000 for the programs, the flowers, the rental of lesson. We have Scholars Night. Scholars Night alone is $7,000. These are the items that the students receive at Scholars Night, the programs and such. We have the school newspaper, which comes out digitally, and it also comes out in a colored hard copy. We have our general supplies, our bid supplies, department supplies. We have chemicals, Project Lead the Way, maps, paint, clay, sheet music, and a variety of all sorts of supplies that we get through here at the high school. Textbooks, we have digital and paper textbooks, a combination of both. We actually send some of our books to be rebinded, which saves us some money. We have novels that we replace every year in general replacement cost. Just so you know, a textbook nowadays can go anywhere from $95 to $175 per textbook. So the amount of money goes up substantially depending on what books we're looking at. So, and for a total of $269,000 approximately. Questions? Yes.
The calculators, like the mapping calculators for math.
They're not necessarily the mapping calculators. When we test the students, every student has to have a calculator, and you can't use your phone. So we go through probably about $4,000 in calculators a year between replacement costs and regular calculators. each classroom, each math classroom has the graphing calculators in a classroom so kids can sign them out. But generally, just for straight regular calculators, it's about $4,000 a year, plus the batteries, which oddly enough cost an incredible. Other questions? Thank you.
Okay, so all of our expenditures or I should say most of our expenditures are able to be allocated to a certain department throughout the district. However, we have certain unallocated instructional costs, and they're broken down here in these three categories. Our textbook and health service costs for our students, Brewster students, attending non-public schools in other districts. Through New York State education law, we're required to reimburse those other school districts for the services provided to Brewster students. So, for example, if we have a student attending St. James, which is in the Carmel Central School District, and Carmel Schools provides health services to that student, we're required to reimburse Carmel for those costs. And that cost on our budget is $128,000 a year for both health services and textbooks. We have an agreement with the Putnam County Sheriff's Department for our school resource officers and special patrol officers. The budget for that last year was $355,000. 3 SROs in JFK, Wells, and the high school, and we have 1 special patrol officer at CD Star. Finally, we have contractual payments, retirement payments that are subject to collective bargaining agreements. At retirement, we are required to pay for accumulated sick leave in accordance with those collective bargaining agreements, and each year we budget $450,000 for those payouts. And I have a notation in here that we're going to be reclassifying this under the employee benefits section of the budget in 2019-20. Any questions with the unallocated? Yes.
I just want to double check. So we're responsible for providing the textbooks for any Brewster child that's attending a private school in any other district?
Correct.
So if that private school wants to replace their textbooks every year at $175 a year, we're on the hook for that?
Correct. So New York State has a textbook allocation per student, and it's something like $52 a year. But we're not bound, or we're not,
Limited to $52.
we're not limited. Correct. Any other questions? Yes.
Does that go to out-of-state too, private schools?
Yes.
So
It's
even like St. Mary's in Richfield?
Correct. Yes. It's any the
Wherever the
nexus.
Brewster students
Correct.
go,
Yes.
it doesn't just stay in New York City? Okay.
But the private school sets that price, that cost.
Yes. And just for reference, it's about $8,000 is the cost of the textbook reimbursement, and it's about $120,000 for the health service reimbursement. So the cost of the health service reimbursement is much greater than the textbook cost.
Okay, but I knew about
Just to
that.
put
I
it in
didn't know about the
perspective.
textbooks.
Yeah.
Also, when people tell me how can, they go to John F. Kennedy and pay $12,000 and we're paying so much more, it's like, well, because we're subsidizing so much stuff over there that they don't do.
Right.
We're still paying for that. I'm just adding that to my bank of information. Thank you.
Yes.
Even now, from my understanding, in past years, also if Carmel has a student, say with, one of our, then, like for the nursing, for the medical,
Yeah. Well.
they have to reimburse us.
Yeah, except for the last non-public school that existed within Brewster's geographical boundary was St. Lawrence, which closed a few years ago. So we currently have no students attending that school, obviously, because it's closed. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Liz Kennedy, Director of School Personnel Services. This is Amy O'Suley, our Assistant Director of PPS. The PPS department oversees all of our special education services, also our related services, which include psychological counseling services in school, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and we also oversee the nursing staff in the district as well. And our budget encompasses the the services that we provide and the supplies and materials that we'll discuss to our students with IEPs, individual education plans in district, and also our students who are placed out of district settings. So for example, if we have a student at an out-of-district placement who has significant medical or other physical developmental needs and requires specialized equipment, our budget provides the support for students with needs such as that as well. So to give a specific breakdown, our equipment looks at, it includes some of our assistive technology equipment that supports students with their communication, both expressing themselves and also with developing their receptive language skills. And this could be anything from a iPad that supports a student in the classroom, maybe like speech to text type software, to something that is for a student who might be completely nonverbal. So again, there's a wide range of supports and services that are provided within that. For our contractual, this looks at the therapeutic service providers that we contract with, also data filing for CAD reimbursement, office equipment leases, and at times independent educational evaluations. For our supplies, generally instructional classroom materials, every special education teacher has an allotment they're able to spend for their work with students with disabilities. Assessment materials, which include psychological test instruments, also educational assessment instruments, also the same for our speech therapists and occupational therapists, so that way they can conduct evaluations in their areas. And again, some of the basic supplies, just copier and printer toner, copier paper, and also some of the furniture that is required. So the bulk of our budget is within our tuition costs for out-of-district placements. And so this is the general breakdown of what the overall tuition costs are for our students who attend out-of-district public schools, out-of-district private schools, and also out-of-district placements that are located within a BOCES. And so along with the basic tuitions for their placements come, depending on the student's needs, related services such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, vision, hearing, counseling, depending again on the student's individual needs.
So again, in keeping with that concept of worst case scenario, oftentimes we're preparing this budget before, actually every year, we're preparing these budgets before the annual CSE, spring CSE reviews. So therefore we need to be conservative, not knowing how many students are going to be placed out, although obviously Ms. Kennedy and Ms. Sasuli have a very good understanding. There's also the unknown. So there's the unknown if we have a new student moving into the district that has needs that requires out-of-district placement. And there, the evolution of a student's needs that, a student who may be in district this year may be required to be placed out of district next year. So again, another example of why we need to be conservative in our budgeting. It's for the unknown. So we do that in order to meet the anticipated needs of our students.
Thank you. And yes, so these are some of the questions that we always keep in mind as we're proceeding. This past summer, for example, we did have at least 4 students transferred into the district. And so that's just an example of times where we do estimate based on our current needs, but then we also take into account what can change.
Any questions?
Victor, do we have any students that attend Brewster from other public school districts that's offsetting for that?
Yes, we do. We do. And in fact, today I was contacted by a director from another district who may be interested in submitting a referral packet for students. So it's something, if we have an appropriate program that another district might not, we do absolutely entertain it and closely consider a student's referral.
And is the tuition determined on, is it like 33,000?
It's actually determined by New York State. So New York State sets the tuition rates for each district based on their special education costs. So our special education rate would be the same for any number of students attending our schools. So currently, I believe we only have one student attending Brewster from out of district, and I'm not certain how our board policy allows for additional students, but I understand that this one student in particular was grandfathered in nearly a decade ago or more. So we'd have to look into our board policy, and also, as Ms. Kennedy mentioned, making sure that we have the space and the ability to educate students, after first tending to our needs here in Brewster.
Thank you.
So I understand why a child would need to go to a private school. What are the situations that have them go to another public school?
It could be something similar to what I just described, a situation where that other public school has a program that's specifically created for students with specific needs, and while we might not have such intensive supports with that specific area here, the other public school district might, and so we may look at considering that program. And sometimes if the student is in need of an extra placement and there is a public school district that has an appropriate program, we sometimes give that a little bit more consideration because it still gives the student the opportunity to be in a school setting. That way eventually they might be able to more easily transition back. So it depends on the student's specific needs. But there are some circumstances in which a particular school district might have a special program for students with a specific set of needs that we don't, so we might send a referral packet there. And then similarly, as we mentioned, in one student's case already, we have that program that student's district does not. So we're always looking at trying to evolve our programs and expand them, but that would be a case in which why a student might go to another public school district program.
Residential, if we have a student in a residential, we keep them to the age of 21. How expensive is that?
It does depend on the specific residential program. Oftentimes, students may continue until they're age 21. It depends on the circumstances. Not in every student's circumstance will, they might actually graduate sooner and not need to stay until 21. In some situations, they do. So it does depend. We're counting the cost of the tuition for the student to be at that program. There's also the possibility of related services there, and it can vary. But usually it's at the absolute minimum, $75,000, I would say. Then it can go up.
How many students do we have in residential? About approximate. I'm not asking for that. I was just curious.
And when a student is placed residentially, part of the initial meeting includes a plan to be developed at every time we meet and continuously updated on what is their plan to return back to the home. So we work very closely with that. It's not just they're placed there and they stay there and it's for long term. It's always how can we transition them back to the home.
Right now, there are 3 students placed out, and as Mrs. Osuli mentioned, it's a decision that's made with extreme caution if the student's needs rise to that level. We also bring in support from the local community agencies of the county to make sure that every support has been exhausted before a recommendation for such a restrictive setting is made. But at this time, 3. And as I mentioned, we're committed to making sure that students are provided with the least restrictive environment as much as possible. It's hard to say exactly because it does depend on the student's individual situation, but I would say that at least $75,000 is what it is.
I just wanted a ballpark. I didn't need all that.
Is there a maximum mileage reimbursement for where a child can go out of district for school, or is it just based on need?
It's based on need. It again depends on the student's individual circumstances, what the program is, and if they can tolerate a longer ride there.
We bus them as well.
We do, yes. So transportation is also that.
Any other questions?
Good evening. My name is Jim Trelaw. I am the Director of Technology and Innovation. And this budget is really comprehensive in covering everything from the devices students, teachers, and staff use to how they connect to the internet, how they connect to network resources, how all of the software that we use, whether it's for financial software, instructional software, etc. So that's all compiled in here. $20,000 for just replacement costs for different devices. Contractual is one part of our internet service that we have. We have two different lines that come in. Things like printing, filtering, and firewall, our website, backup and storage, things like that under the contractual line. Under computer hardware, that's our instructional devices, Chromebooks, iPads, some displays in the classrooms. And under the software, that's instructional software, things like BrainPop, NewsELA, MobiMax, Streambox, Achieve 3000, all of those different instructional programs that get used in the classroom and at home by students. Supplies, a little bit higher than other supply budgets, but that's with things like cabling, miscellaneous computer supplies, repair parts. We do have a one-to-one program that does require a lot of repairs to those devices, and so that's part of that budget. And then under the BOCES service, again, which is majority of which is aidable, is our other internet line, so that we have duplication of internet to maintain uptime, data, other software. That's where all of our IEP Direct, our financial software, things like that, as well as all of our phones and services like that that come directly from us. Any questions?
Does that include, I was asking Ms. Farler about the calculator earlier, do you have replacement calculators or parts? Let's say if the kids misplace them or if they get broken,
So
anything that you have?
those, we do have that for the Chromebooks, but the calculators come out of the high school budgets in particular.
Okay.
So, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Dean Berardo, Director of Physical Education, Health and Athletics. Our equipment line here, athletic equipment, strength and conditioning, team equipment, some of our bigger ticket items that may not be easily replaced. This amount this year is a little bit higher because the amount of money that was donated or earned by Senator Murphy is in there for baseball and softball field equipment, which we are in the process of, even today, just evaluating what we're going to do. Contractual. The contractual line has the athletic trainer, medical services such as a school physician, outside facilities, rentals, whether it's Thunder Ridge, the Brewster Ice Arena, the different pools that we may use. You have various contracts such as for sound systems at the fields, scoreboards, which are a big to-do, tournament registration fees, kind of go with those contractual pieces as well. For supplies, physical education, health, the general education, physical education supplies you might see in classes, the various objects, bats, balls, etc., adapted physical education equipment, instructional supplies as well. For supplies in general for athletics, the team and athletic training supplies, with this specifically team, there again, depending on sport, whatever they're using to play with, and then athletic training supplies, you have uniforms, and then as far as the BOCES services, we do belong to Westchester BOCES, like in other aspects of our district. Section 1 has a membership, which we have there. Section 1 runs the officials that we have for all of our games and contests. Also in Section 1, they house a PE consortium. We have through there an aidable Family ID, which is our athletics online registration system, and Huddle, which we use for sports technology.
Any questions from Mr. Bernardo? And finally, we have our transportation budget. Again, it's actually fairly large relative to the other departments, and for good reason. We have a transportation fleet of over 100 vehicles. We transport over 3,200 students So our equipment costs are vehicle parts, tires, chains, lubricants, bulbs, fuses, cameras, things of that nature. I want to note our equipment budget has been on the decline over the past several years as the district continues to implement the fleet replacement plan. So that's been a positive impact on our budget. You'll see that reflected in 1920 as well. Contractual costs for repairs. These are specialty repairs that we're unable to perform in the transportation garage. It includes restoration and body work, as well as painting and things of that nature. Contractual services for BOCES for transportation services. These are individualized transportation services for ambulette. There may be circumstances where a student with severe needs requires some ambulette transport. Also, BOCES shuttle. If we have students attending two BOCES sites, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, BOCES provides that transportation on our behalf, and we're required to reimburse that BOCES. Field trips and athletic shuttles is also included in this slide. Our contractual costs include our radio lease, insurance costs for insuring all of our vehicles, driver training, uniform, and tool reimbursements, medical exams, our routing software, and things of that nature. Another large part of our budget is our diesel and gasoline fuel budget, and it's $352,000. This fortunately has been coming down over the years, but you'll see in the next slide the questions that we posed to show the contingency that's required in that line item. Supplies include cleaning, training materials, student orientation materials for our kindergartners. This past August, Ms. Smith and Ms. Volpe put on a training for our kindergartners, and was well received, and we look to continue that next year with the assistance of Dr. Zambrook and general office supplies. So in total, our transportation budget, it makes up 1.4% of our total budget. And again, I pose these questions. What will the price of diesel and gasoline be 15 months after the budget is adopted? Because the board's required to adopt the budget the first week in April. So we're responsible for coming up with a budget sometime before April. We'll be transporting 15 months beyond that date. So we need to estimate what the price of diesel and gasoline fuel will be for the following 15 months. How many of our buses will break down at some point this year? Will it be more or less than normal? Of the 24 buses that are over 15 years old, and those numbers are based on last May's presentation, so they will be updated in the coming months when we get into next year's budget cycle. But of those aging buses, how many will require significant repairs? Will this be more or less than normal? These are the unknown. But in order to maintain the safety of our student transportation vehicles, we don't budget for normal. We budget for the anticipated worst-case scenario. Does anyone have any questions with regard to our transportation budget? Yes.
Did we use the full, or is it anticipated that we'll use that full 1.4% this year, or has it?
We have not begun our fund balance projections yet for this year. We usually do it for the month end of December, and we're actually working on it this week. Okay. So we're working on our fund balance projections. And you'll see with the budget, when we prepare the budget, we do also prepare an estimated expense for the current year. So we haven't yet begun to project for this year. But what I will say in response to the same or a similar question that was asked earlier, if anything is unspent, it remains in the budget. It remains in the transportation budget. Does that answer?
So then does it come off, so then say you have 500,000 that you didn't spend, then when you put up that budget next for, you just keep it the same, you don't drop it?
No.
I don't really understand.
Well, I'll just take diesel fuel for example.
Okay.
So in projecting diesel fuel, we look at futures, and we do the best we can to estimate what the future cost of diesel fuel will be. We know relatively, within several 100,000 miles, much more than that, but what our annual mileage is each year, and we take that number and we multiply it by what we think the cost of diesel fuel will be, and that's how we come up with our diesel fuel budget. Suppose we based our diesel fuel budget on a cost of $2.50. And the reality was that during the year we got diesel for $2 even. Well, then obviously our budget includes an extra 50 cents per mile that we hadn't anticipated we were going to spend. And that money would remain in the transportation budget in the diesel fuel. So if it remains unspent, it just remains in the budget.
So So there's two things, a follow-up to that one. So last year we had an additional expense for the replacement of radios. So that would have driven.
This year, in the 18-19 year.
So if
And
that
that's-
was a $400,000 expense, do we expect to see next year's budget, because you're not going to need to invest in that, would that then drop by potentially $400,000?
It was not, it wasn't $400,000. It's a lease, so it's an annual commitment. And actually, some good news with that is the lease that we purchased, because we went out through competitive bidding, our lease was less than what our budget was. So that's like another concept that we need to consider, is that when we're preparing the budgets, we don't yet know what the cost of certain items will be, because we haven't yet held a public bid, which is a requirement under general municipal law. So we have to estimate, again, worst case scenario, what the cost could be. So in terms of our lease for our radio lease, we will see decreases in the lease costs, or at least in the budget. We'll see decreases in the leases for radio lease for both facilities and transportation as a result of that successful bid that we had this past spring.
So let's say it was 400 in the budget, and then it went down, you're only using 300, so now you have a $100,000 surplus. Does that stay, is that money allocated so that it doesn't get swept and reused for anything else? Is it line item allocated that if you didn't use it for radio transportation, it can't be used for anything else?
It's removed in the budget, because each year, again, as we mentioned.
Sorry, not going, I mean, within
the current
that
year.
year's, in the current year. What happens to that 100,000? Does it just, it can't be spent, or it can be reallocated for some other expense?
It could be reallocated. It could be reallocated.
And then just the other thing, Brewster was is still one of the only districts that trains their drivers. Years ago, when we didn't hire full-time, we had drivers leaving left, right, and central to get full-time jobs. Now that it's better and we do hire full-time, we're still training. And is there any way do you guys tie people to a contract if they pass and they're a good driver? Do you tie them to you have to stay 2 years or something?
I think that's a provision of the collective bargaining agreement. Ms. Culligan can probably assist me, but I believe that it's a provision of the collective bargaining agreement that we're required to provide that training, and that we don't do it by choice; it's by contract.
So all the other schools around us do that?
I don't know what their contracts are.
Okay, so you're saying Brewster's union requires that? Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's contractual. We are due, right now, we do a recruiting fair that we're holding for bus drivers, and one of the criteria is for requiring people to come up licensed.
Okay.
Anyone have any other questions for transportation? I believe that, so that concludes our workshop for this evening. Thank you all for coming. In case you're unable to attend, or you have friends who are unable to attend, please refer them to our Budget 101 website. As Dr. Henning mentioned at the start, we have a lot of reference materials, including these presentations, the YouTubes of these presentations, Q&A documents, infographics, and a number of other items that we're posting there throughout the year. So please continue to refer back to that as a precursor for the 2019-20 budget development. Our next workshop is scheduled for Monday, February 11th. We'll be talking about state aid, tax cap, and other matters.
Very exciting topic. And keep in mind that, and actually we should be getting some information tomorrow from the governor.
Yes. So the state budget is due out tomorrow.
And keep in mind that this constitutes only 14% of the budget. So what we just presented to you is 14%. The other 70% is under is the cost of employing people to run the school system, to educate children, administrators, plus all the folks who are under a contract, and the other 80% is debt services. So it's still just a fairly small part of the budget, but it nevertheless is an important part of being able to operate the system effectively.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming. Tell your friends, tell them to watch Facebook Live and all the resources that are on the website. And thanks again, Chris.